Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Amy Sam. I am the Health Education Project Specialist at the Maxwell and Eleanor Blum Patient Family Learning Center at Mass General. Today's program is part of our Spiritual Care series, a special collaboration between the Blum Center and the Mass General Spiritual Care Department. Before I get started, I just want to give a few items with you all. Please note that today's session is being recorded for educational purposes. If you're interested in viewing the recording, it'll be made available on the Blum Center website at massgeneral.org/Blum-Center. Please note that you're in listen-only mode. Everyone has muted so you can hear our guest speakers today. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts you'd like to share with the guest speakers, you may use the chat feature, which is located at the bottom of your screen. We'll have time for them throughout the session. Please do not share any personal medical information or questions in the chat. If it's a personal medical question, please ask a doctor. Lastly, at the end of today's session, you'll be directed to a brief survey, which we'd like to ask you if it's complete. Your feedback is important to us as we plan future programs. Okay, so next I'd like to introduce you all to our guest speakers. Joining us today, we have Mary Barber Bussiere and Maryclare O'Brien-Wilson. Mary is a clinical social worker at Mass General for Children. She is the program manager for the Pediatric Bereavement Program, as well as a social worker on the Pediatric Palliative Care team. Joining us is also Maryclare. She is a board-certified chaplain working in inpatient as a pediatric spiritual care provider. In addition to this role, she also provides support as a spiritual care provider to the Pediatric Bereavement Program, helping to support families through loss of a child. They join us today to lead a session on grief around the holidays. So please join me in welcoming Mary and Maryclare.
Mary, you're still muted.
I'm still muted. There we go. All right. The PowerPoint is now up. I'll let Maryclare start.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. We're very excited to share this presentation with you. It looks like our PowerPoint, oh, there we go. It's not glitching anymore. Here we are, full speed ahead. So we just wanted to welcome you into this space. Like Amy introduced us, I'm Maryclare, and we just want to invite you to be gentle with yourself as you come into this space. We know that grief is hard. Grief can feel more or less difficult at different points. So just invite you to take care of yourself throughout this presentation, and we'll get into it.
All right. And we already introduced ourselves. But again, I'm Mary. I was Maryclare. I'm the program manager for the bereavement program. All right, so we will give you a little bit of an agenda, just kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about today. It's pretty brief, and again, like Maryclare said, this is a space where we want you to feel comfortable and safe. So we'll talk a little bit about what is grief, what even am I supposed to do now? So what am I supposed to do now during the holiday season? And then ways to embrace your grief around the holidays, which might feel a little silly, but we will get into that. This is something that we often hear, and I have often heard in my years of doing grief work. Can I just go to sleep and wake up when the holidays are all over? And we completely get it. The holidays are incredibly hard for so many different reasons when you are grieving. Sometimes it would just feel easier to press kind of like a fast forward button and bring us to like January 19th, right? And we get that.
And so we just want to acknowledge, as Mary said, that the holidays are different. Sometimes in really acute grief, we feel that the holidays, or that our day-to-day is really hard. But even when our grief isn't super acute, sometimes the holidays bring up grief that we didn't know we were carrying, or we touch it in a new way. So we just want to acknowledge how much harder it can sometimes feel when there's holidays around. So to get us started, I want to invite us to do a little interactive piece right now. And as Amy explained earlier, you have the chat function. And so I'm going to ask you all to write in the chat just one word. We'll keep your responses anonymous. We'll just share the one word out loud so we can kind of come to this together. And this is a process that we use in support groups that we lead. And we just like to check in. Sometimes you have a lot of things coming at you and feels hard to just choose one word, but it's nice to like focus on one word of how you're feeling. So how are you feeling about carrying grief with you during the holiday season? I invite you to put that in the chat. Okay, we've got some good responses coming in. We're feeling collectively calm, tentative, guilty, feeling alone, anxious. Lonely. There's a lot of variety in what comes up for us. And I can imagine that reading some of these words out, we might connect to somebody else's word as well. So I invite you to pay attention to those feelings, and all these feelings are welcome in this space, and we're in this together today.
All right, so a little bit about what is grief. And I know this might feel silly because you're like, well, I'm experiencing grief, but just kind of want to go over what it actually means and what it looks like. So we know that grief affects everyone differently. It affects an individual emotionally and mentally, as well as behaviorally, spiritually, and physically. So that can look like feeling anxious, like somebody said. It also can look like feeling that anxiety in your chest, right? So feeling really heavy right here, or feeling really tired. From an emotional perspective, it can look like feeling really angry one moment and then really sad another. Acute grief is something that's normal and expected reaction that improves over time. So we think about acute grief as initially after a loss. And we want to acknowledge that a loss during the holidays can be many things, right? So it can be a loss of person, like a partner, a spouse, a grandparent, a friend, a child. A loss can also feel like a loss of a community, right? So maybe you have moved away from a community physically, you're in a different location, maybe you've completely moved, or maybe you're no longer connected with the community that you were. So grief is a normal and expected reaction that improves over time. Prolonged grief disorder is something that you might have heard about, and that's a persistent type of grief that's disabling and affects everyday function. So that looks a little bit different than our acute grief. And sometimes during the holidays, we see that acute grief kind of peak up, like a trigger point, we call it. And that's normal because the holidays, like we'll go over, are really triggering for people because there's family time, there's traditions, there's rituals, there's a lot more sense of community, and you often feel a lot more lonely. And disenfranchised grief is grief not acknowledged or validated by society or your support system. Disenfranchised grief is really common during the holidays. Maybe if you're grieving right now, and maybe it's been a year, maybe 5 years, maybe it's been 20, and people will say like, aren't you over that by now? That's disenfranchised grief because you're still grieving no matter how long it has been. Similarly, maybe the grief you're experiencing is that you're not going to be with your family, right? So maybe they live in California and you just, for whatever reason, aren't able to go home. And there's grief in that. And that is disenfranchised grief because it's not something that is really acknowledged by our society. And then grief is really individual. Oftentimes we hear about stages of grief. Stages of grief are not a thing. Grief is incredibly individualized for everyone. We like to show these pictures to give a little overview of what we see when we think of grief. So the first picture up here with the bag. So initially, grief is this really heavy, kind of like a big bag full of stuff, right? And the hope is that over time, it feels a little lighter. So maybe it's a briefcase, and then maybe it's a bag that you have on your shoulder. It doesn't go away. It just gets a little lighter. Similarly, this is one of my favorite images. And it says, it's kind of hard to read, but it says, people tend to believe that grief shrinks over time, when what really happens is we grow around our grief, right? So people think that grief gets smaller. Your grief doesn't get any smaller. You just learn to grow around your grief. And then this last picture over here in the corner, this was by an artist, and I'm blanking on his name. It was actually not made to describe grief, but a lot of grievers really like resonated with it. And they saw that that's how grief feels, kind of as though you're hunched over and just feeling really heavy. And we see that heaviness come up a lot during the holiday season.
Yeah, and here's another image that we like to use because I think different people can connect to different images, and the last three kind of show us some trajectory over time. But as Mary said earlier, that there aren't stages to grief, and it's not a linear experience. We're not saying that, you know, your briefcase is definitely going to turn into a smaller bag and it'll never get bigger, or your container will always feel like it has enough space for you to grieve. But that grief is different one moment to the next, and sometimes it'll feel bigger. And like Mary was saying, again, sometimes at the holidays there will be a trigger point, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, I thought my grief felt smaller, and today it feels bigger. And so just honoring that it's not linear, and it can just come up and be different one moment to the next. So I want to invite us to join in the chat again, invite a little interactive response. And just to bring forward, what are some of your biggest worries about grieving during the holiday season? Feel free to type one or two thoughts. I see a worry about being alone, not being with community that gets it. Even I think about not just being physically alone, but feeling alone in a crowd of people because people don't understand it. And I see actually multiple people using the word burden, not wanting to be a burden to others, not wanting to feel like you're burdening others, and not wanting to carry the burden that you're carrying, or worrying about being a Debbie Downer. That's a really common experience that we hear. Like, if I bring up my grief, or if I'm not able to be happy right now, what is everybody else going to think? And am I going to ruin the holidays for other people? Or disappointing others. What if I can't show up the way that they want me to show up? Yeah. Another response, how exhausting it is when you're expected to be with family and friends who don't understand. So kind of that experience of worrying about being a Debbie Downer and how will other people perceive me, but also how much energy it takes for you to be in those spaces, right? It is exhausting, especially if this is the first time you're in large groups of people after experiencing a loss. Loss of beloved traditions and community, all different types of loss. Other people not understanding. I see a lot of similarities and a lot of people joining each other in the chat here. Thank you for taking the time to reflect. Yeah, so we asked the question, why is it that the holidays are especially difficult for grieving individuals? And I think each of us, if I were to open this again to the chat, each of us could come up with different reasons. And we've collected just a few for us. So some of the reasons that the holidays feel even harder is that because our normal activities shut down. The rest of daily life isn't going on as it, or the routines that we have created just aren't the same anymore. There's celebration all around us. There's spirit and traditions, and we're thrust into a world of happiness and joy. Oftentimes that means more family time, or large groups, or communities, or company parties. You know, there are a lot of large group activities, and that can make it even harder. And then in all of this, just the expectations that you have, a lot of what people were saying in the chat, expectations about how you are expected to show up in all of these things.
This is just kind of a quote that we resonated with Maryclare and I. And in the quiet, I hear the echo of your absence. In the stillness, in the silence, my heart aches with emptiness. Loss is so loud. Oh, loss is so loud. Liz Newman. When I was listening to Maryclare read out the responses, that I was thinking of kind of this slide and like that feeling a little bit like the elephant in the room, like your loss feels so loud to you when you walk into that crowded room. People are staring and you feel alone and you feel like you have to be really loud and you have to be present in your old self, right? When really what you're feeling is your loss. We want to tell you that it's okay if this is not the most wonderful time of the year. You will see plastered all over the mall or social media or all these beautiful pictures of people with their families and all these amazing cards you might get in the mail. And we are told that you have to be happy this time of year. It's the most wonderful time of year. Don't be Scrooge. It's okay if it's not. It's okay if it's just putting one foot in front of the other. So how do I get through the holidays while grieving? This is kind of a quick, like a quick little sheet. And we're going to go a little bit more in depth, but we wanted to give you these initial thoughts. And we split them up by verb. So say no a lot. We are often people who say yes, right? We're often told when we're grieving, just go and do that plan. Get out of the house, right? It'll help you. I'm sure you've heard that. Say no. No is a complete sentence. It's okay to say no. Choose your gatherings carefully. So again, I heard a lot in some of those responses about feeling like you were Debbie Downer or feeling like you shouldn't be there. If there's a gathering where it just doesn't, it's going to feel so emotionally exhausting to go, you don't have to go. Maybe that means asking that group, I just can't go. Do you mind coming over after? Or do you want to get dinner before? And then, I'll go home and you guys can continue on to that gathering. Be mindful of which ones you choose. Find companionship. So again, lonely. It can feel really, really lonely. Is there someone who's maybe experienced a loss as well, even if that loss is very different from yours? Is there someone who has really been there for you? And we'll go a little bit more in depth in that, but is there someone who's been there for you? Find companionship. Constantly check in with yourself. Pulse check, just like what we did in the beginning. Is there one word on how you're feeling, right? So is it next Wednesday, right? The day before Thanksgiving. Check in with yourself. Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling anxious? Okay. What will help you then? Make new rituals. Again, we'll go over this a little bit more in depth. Plan. Have a plan before you go out. That is really important. And we're going to go over that as well. And then leave a gathering whenever you want to leave. So just like you choose your gathering really carefully, you can also leave when you want to leave. You don't have to stay there to make other people happy, right? That's not your goal. Your goal right now is to get through the next few weeks and feel as though you were in a space and you're protecting your peace.
So here's a little bit more about kind of how to do some of those things. We like to talk about building your team. And you're going to need multiple people to do multiple different things for you during the holiday season, or different people are going to be able to show up in different ways. And so it's not a reasonable expectation that one person can be your person through all of this. And our emotional needs deserve to be met. So who are the people in your life that are most skilled? How can they best support you?
So we like to split this up into 4 categories. And if you know Maryclare and I, you might have heard this before. So think of it as a refresher. But who are your teammates? And there are more than these 4 categories, but this is how we would encourage you guys to think about it. So you have your listener. So this is someone who listens without interjection. They're the person you can go to talk about the loss you're experiencing, and they just nod their head and they hear you. They ask questions. They say, what can I do? What do you need? They are the person who can be uncomfortable, right? So they are comfortable in the discomfort. Just take a second and maybe think about that person in your life. Who is the listener in your life? Then we have the doer. So the doer, they are not a listener. They can't sit in the discomfort. If you were to sit there on the couch and tell them about your loss and how you're feeling really lonely, and be vulnerable with them, they would get up and do the dishes. This is your doer. So they like to get things done. They're really task oriented. They are that checklist person. They are that person who can do meals and laundry. This is really important because especially during the holiday season, grief takes our energy. Again, going back to what someone said in that chat, it's emotionally draining to go certain places. So does this mean, let's say you are going to a friend gathering and it's like a Friendsgiving or it's a potluck and you're expected to bring a meal and it just feels too much. Can you call your doer, the doer in your life, and say, I'm supposed to bring this meal. I don't have the energy. Can you help me? Right? Maybe they come over and cook with you. Maybe they say, oh yeah, I'll cook my something casserole, right? That's the doer in your life. So again, take a second and just think of who your doer is. So then you have your distractor. This is someone who takes your mind off the grief. They actually might have no association with your loss. They might be someone you met after you experienced a loss. They might not know your person, might not know your experience, might not know that maybe the loss is of a community. They offer things to do with you outside of your space. So maybe that's hiking, maybe that's walking, maybe that's taking a trip. So a distractor during the holiday season, maybe you're supposed to go to this like big family party you have every year. It's the third weekend of December every single year. And you go to this party and you do like a gift exchange or something, and you just know you can't go this year. But also sitting at home alone feels really hard too. Maybe you call your distractor, even if there's someone who goes to that and say, I can't go to this today, or I can't go to that next weekend. Will you do something with me? Can we go for a hike? Can we go walk around the mall? Can we go get coffee, right? So that's your distractor. They are someone who can distract you from what's going on. So again, take a second, just think of who a distractor is in your life. And then the last one is a little bit not a teammate. We like to throw this in there because it's an important person to just recognize within your grief process. I call them the me's. There's not a great word for them. They function in drama or chaos. So it's more about themselves than your loss. So they are someone who maybe you share that you're feeling lonely and you're feeling nervous, and then they go tell someone else who tells someone else, and then it comes back to you. And it's like, oh, why are you feeling that way? You shouldn't be feeling that way. So this person maybe is just not someone who's your teammate. And unfortunately, most of us have this person in our life. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means that they are not really your teammate for this season in life. And this person, it's really important to set boundaries and expectation, right? Maybe they're the person who says, you need to go to the holiday party. You'll feel so much better, right? And saying, I'm not going, and I'm going to do something else that day, right? Setting a boundary. So those are our 4 categories. And like Maryclare said, we think that one person can do everything. And we set ourselves up a little bit for this disaster because people can't be everything for us. But maybe someone can be both your distractor and your listener, right? Maybe someone can be the doer and the listener. But think about these people. Think about who they are for you and how they can help you navigate the holiday season. Because even though it feels really lonely, these people are the ones who can help you navigate the next few weeks.
Yeah, the other reason I like thinking about these teams is that sometimes the people that are closest to us are also grieving and can't be all these things for us. And so it helps to say, okay, who else do I have and what kind of categories are they in? And then it helps us sometimes to feel less disappointment when somebody can't meet our expectations, or at least to just acknowledge that disappointment and say they're not that type of person. And I'm sad that they can't be that type of person for me, but it's okay right now. And we're just going to get through this by leaning on my other supports. So, one of the things that's also helpful is making a game plan for the holidays. Sometimes wondering what the season will be like is the hardest part, not just actually getting through it, but the fear and the buildup going into the season can create the most stress for us. So building a plan with your community, with your teammates, with your family can help to reduce the anxiety and the stress, especially if there's children involved. If you, Mary and I, we both work on the bereavement team, so we often are working with like younger families and children who are experiencing grief. And especially when there's children in the mix, helping give structure and a plan and setting expectations can be really helpful. So lean on your teammates, ask for help, who can do what. And one of the things that we're planning for is triggers. So we can't plan everything ahead. We don't know exactly what to expect. This might be the first time going into a holiday season with as heavy of a grief as you feel like you're carrying. And so just to be, the only thing we can expect is that there will be triggers, that things will be hard. So taking some time ahead of the holidays to think about what might trigger me. What are the things that I'm worried about encountering? Who is the person that I'm worried about feeling like a burden to? What is it that I'm worried about feeling alone in? What are things that bring out these feelings? Is there a certain holiday song, traditions that you've always done with somebody that is no longer going to be there to do them with you? Or who is somebody that you're going to see? The important thing is not to deny these triggers or to ignore them, but to acknowledge them and prepare for them.
And I would also add that your triggers might be different from someone else in your life who is grieving. Perhaps you're grieving the same person or the same thing. You may have different triggers than them. And this is why we say it's important to have a game plan, because maybe the song that you hear is really triggering for you, but for someone else in your family, it's not triggering. They love to hear it. It's really important for them. So how do you navigate that? What does that look like within your family or community unit?
So again, with the game plan, planning for your triggers is not just saying, okay, when I hear this song, this is what we're going to do. It's having plan A, B, and C. It's like, I think this is what I might need, but if that doesn't work, how about this? And here's another option. Just having autonomy and giving each person in your family, in your group, in your community, like the autonomy that they need to make the best choices for themselves. And then communicating this to the people around you that, you know, I am going to have these different plans. And maybe it's you having the plans for yourself in your context, or maybe it's you and a spouse having plans together that encounter both of your needs. So this is just how to have multiple layers of escapes or ways to move around these triggers.
And the way that we kind of like to think about it, if you were going to take the information, this particular information that we're sharing with you to someone else in your family, be like, I need a game plan. You can think of it like American football, right? You wouldn't have, a football team wouldn't go into a game without multiple different plans or plays, just like you as a grieving individual shouldn't go into a gathering or a holiday season without different plans. So maybe to go back to like a big, third weekend of December holiday gathering, maybe plan A is that you're going to go for an hour. Maybe plan B is that you are going to go for the whole entire time. And maybe plan C is that you aren't going to go at all, right? Or maybe plan A is that you're going to go until something bad happens, and then that happens, you're going to leave, you're going to find your distractor, and you're going to leave. So different game plans for different situations. All right. This is something that we just like to share if you're kind of looking for something really like that goes a little bit more in depth. This is by the Dougy Center, which is a center based out of on the West Coast. That's one of like the biggest grief centers for children, but they do a lot of work with families as well, which is kind of why we wanted to share this. And this is something you can find right on their website, the holiday plan worksheet. And it goes through when you're planning as a family, or even if it's just, you and a friend, or you and your adult children, or whatever your family unit, your community might look like, how do you plan for it? So have a family meeting. What are some questions? What's our family plan checklist? What is food going to look like? What are decorations going to look like? Do we want to put up a tree if we celebrate Christmas? Do we want to put up a menorah? What are things that feel good for us? Do we want to still run our turkey trot that we run on Thanksgiving? So traditions, do we want to do traditions, post holidays, and then a reflection? Again, this is just something that we have found that it's been helpful for families that we work with, and we wanted to share it with you all. All right, you have a game plan. So now what? So you've made your game plans, you have plan A, B, and C, you've talked about it with your family. Now what happens? So be informed about the events. So ask as many questions as you can. Who's going to the event? How long is the event? What are the expectations? Are you supposed to bring something? Be informed, because information is power, right? It's your ability to make a decision that works best for yourself. Give yourself permission to start, change, or keep traditions. Maryclare is going to go a little bit more into traditions and rituals, but it's okay to not do the same thing this year. It's okay to maybe have done something last year and change it up. It's also okay to keep traditions, but it's really important that you communicate it with those around you so they know what's going on. And maybe that looks like passing it on to your listener, or that person you've identified as your listener, and asking them to communicate it to other people. Check in with yourself again. So that slide that I showed a few minutes ago, check in with yourself. If something feels daunting, change it. If something brings about happy memories, especially for kids or siblings, try to keep it. If something's pulling you in a different direction, listen to that. Start doing it. Maybe this is the year you skip out on Thanksgiving and you get in the car and drive, I don't know, up to Maine or something, or hop on a plane, or go into Boston for the day, whatever it might look like. Start something different. And then again, once you've decided your plan, let others know.
So we want to acknowledge that the holidays often bring a lot of things that happen during the holidays are religious traditions, and religion can be heavy with grief. It can feel supportive, and it can also feel harder because we're encountering our grief in a new way. And so a lot of holidays often involve rituals and have this religious significance. So sometimes we have familiarity and comfort, and sometimes connecting to these traditions can fall flat when we're feeling a lot of grief. So just to honor, first of all, step one, honor that grief and honor that it feels hard. So group services, they may feel overwhelming or triggering, like we've been talking about. It may feel like it's too much to be in a large group of people. It also could feel like I can get lost in this group and I can be just another face in the crowd. So paying attention to how that sits for you. And then the other thing is, like, when it feels too hard to be in a group, but there's something about that tradition that you want to hold on to, maybe consider bringing aspects of your traditions into your home. Are there songs that you like to sing? Are there certain prayers that feel comforting? Can you bring those into a smaller group of people? Can you invite a smaller group to do some of these traditions with you, to have a prayer night, to light the candles on your menorah? Are there things that feel helpful and supportive for you? And it doesn't have to be all in or all out. There can be aspects of step 1 and 2. There's, like we said, game plans A, B, and C. There can be a portion of this that I'm going to try and a portion of this that I want to hold on to, and something that I can set aside for right now. And then bringing things into your home. What does it look like to create a new ritual? What does it look like to create a ritual around your loss? Oftentimes, especially if you're grieving somebody specific, lighting a memorial candle and asking others to share memories. So this can either be something that you do personally, where you light your own candle, and then you either journal or write a letter to the person you're grieving, or you invite people to join you. You could write those memories on paper, make a paper chain to wrap around a Christmas tree, put it on the table next to menorah or around other holiday decorations. Another thing that we find people find helps people during the holidays is to volunteer. And this is something that can help at many stages of grief. Being able to channel your energy into helping other people and focusing on others can sometimes bring a lot of relief to that grief that feels like it's pulling you inward. And this can be, you know, there's a lot of holiday opportunities for serving a meal for somebody else, or buying gifts. It doesn't even have to be interacting with other people. It could be one of those gift giving volunteer opportunities where you buy gifts for another family. Another one that I like to think about, especially as winter solstice is coming around, doing things with different elements with the fire, writing your intentions or your hopes or your fears, some of the things that we've put in the chat, writing those on pieces of paper and throwing them in the fireplace, or, you know, it's been a little warmer this year, doing it outside in a fire pit. Or just simply cooking your favorite foods, cooking favorite foods of someone you love, or asking somebody else to cook those foods for you. It's okay if you don't feel like you can do the cooking, but that you want to eat a certain food, and you can ask somebody, can you make sure that this is on the menu this year? And
Something else, sorry.
go.
I say something else that comes up, I think, with supportive rituals is supportive people. And that could be maybe a community, a grief community. Perhaps you've been to a support group, or perhaps you have gotten to know someone because you have a similar loss or a shared loss, or maybe theirs was 20 years ago and yours was recent. Is that a community that you can call upon during the holiday season and maybe have people at your house or meet somewhere and do some of these things with a group of people who get it?
And I think too, an important thing to think about when you're thinking about these rituals, when maybe you haven't ever done a ritual before in a very concentrated way, and just to be able to be gentle with yourself as you go into this. Like, even I do rituals in my job all the time, but one of the things that when I'm doing a ritual for myself, I just have to let go of the pressure of having it be perfect or having it meet the exact need that I need it to meet, but that we just try something. And sometimes it might feel silly at first, and it might induce laughter. It might induce a lot of tears. But being able to just be easy with yourself and gentle with yourself as you try something new. Just see if it works. It doesn't have to be your new thing forever. It can just be for right now.
So what are the main takeaways? Be honest with yourself. Be honest with yourself and be honest with those around you. Again, it's okay to say no, and no is a complete sentence. And I want everyone to repeat that to themselves in their head. Like, no is a complete sentence. And really be honest with how you're feeling with yourself. Are you seeking out connection? Do you want to be somewhere, even if it feels really hard? Or do you not want to be with certain people, or do you need to get away? Set boundaries. I feel like boundaries have become kind of like one of those big topics that we probably see everywhere, but they are really important. What are the boundaries that feel important for you? Is it that you don't want to be in a big group? Is it that you need people to not say something that feels triggering for you? Like, oh, it's been so long. Aren't you over that by now? Set a boundary. Don't avoid your emotions. I think oftentimes during this season of the year, we push them down. Feels easier, right? Just like, don't feel it. Just push it down, push it down. The problem is when we push all of our emotions down, they eventually come back up, right? Don't avoid your emotions. And I know that's really hard because during the holidays, we are triggered so much and it feels like maybe we're crying all the time or we're sad all the time. That's okay. It's okay to feel that way. Use kind of who's around you. Do you have a therapist you can connect with? Do you have a community that you can connect with? Maybe it's someone within your religious community that you can connect with. Don't avoid those emotions. One of my favorite things is having an elevator pitch ready. So this is kind of an example of an elevator pitch. The holidays look different for us this year, and we're still trying to figure it out. We're not sure we can come. Thank you for understanding. Right? So there's a acknowledgement that the holidays are different. Still figuring it out. We can't commit right now. Thank you for understanding. So it doesn't welcome any, oh, please come. We'll make it exciting for you, right? It's concise and it's direct. So I encourage each of you to have an elevator pitch ready, no matter what that looks like for you, so that you have something in your mind you can kind of pull out and say when maybe an invitation comes up or an expectation comes up. And then how to respond to unhelpful things people say. Reflect to yourself, what do I need right now? Set an expectation, a boundary. I know it comes from a good place when you say you're going to do X, but in my grief journey, I need XYZ right now. And then I'm going to add something because it's something that I heard again in the chat that came up, which was feeling like you were the Debbie Downer, or that you would bring the mood down. And I think a lot of that is because something Maryclare and I talk about is that our society isn't one that welcomes grief. We avoid it. We think it's contagious. And there's this poem called The Elephant in the Room. I encourage everyone to kind of take a look at it. And it's about how we don't say a person's name or we don't acknowledge the grief. And it's okay if you go into the room and maybe you talk to your listener and you say, can you bring so-and-so up? Can we talk about them? Right? It's okay to bring that person up or bring that thing up. And that can often bring people together and take away some of those feelings that you might be feeling when you enter that type of space.
And we just want to end on this poem. And before I read this poem, I wanted to invite everyone to just do one more quick pulse check. We like to end on another pulse check when we do our support groups, and so we wanted to share this ritual with you all as well. And just to say, we're checking back in with ourselves. How are we feeling now? And it's okay if it's the same word. It's okay if we're feeling also still worried. It's not an expectation that we have changed, but it's just acknowledging our feelings one more time. So I invite us to type one word into the chat about how we're feeling now after having dove into this topic, just to be able to check in with yourself. And again, this will be completely anonymous. We'll share the words out loud, but it won't be attached to who you are. We have someone who said they're feeling calmer, someone who is feeling tender. I appreciate we have feelings of still anxious, but better prepared with the tools. So acknowledging that the emotion doesn't change. Informed. Thank you all for sharing. Okay. I'm going to read this poem for us as we close out. I invite you to either close your eyes if you would like, or just to sit and read along with me. This is by Emily Dickinson. I measure every grief I meet with narrow, probing eyes. I wonder if it weighs like mine or has an easier size. I wonder if they bore it long, or did it just begin? I could not tell the date of mine. It feels so old a pain. I wonder if it hurts to live, and if they have to try, and whether, could they choose between, it would not be to die. I note that some, gone patient long, at length renew their smile, an imitation of a light that has so little oil. I wonder if when years have piled some thousands on the harm that hurt them early, such a lapse could give them any balm. Or would they go on aching still through centuries of nerve, enlightened to a larger pain, in contrast with the love? The grieved are many, I am told. There is the various cause. Death is but one, and comes but once, and only nails the eyes. There's grief of want, and grief of cold, a sort they call despair. There's banishment from native eyes, in sight of native air. And though I may not guess the kind correctly, yet to me a piercing comfort it affords, to note the fashions of the pain, and how they're mostly worn, still fascinated to presume that some are like my own. Just wanted to share this poem to close us out because it just acknowledges that we're holding all different types of grief, and your grief may not look like the next person's grief, but that you're not alone in your grief even when it feels very isolating. So thank you all for coming, and we invite any questions you might have. You're welcome to put them in the chat or anything else you want to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Maryclare. We had shared a helpful tool. It was the holiday plan worksheet. I had provided that link in the chat, so if anyone's interested. I'm also going to share our Blums on our website. If you're interested in viewing the recording today, it'll be made available on our website. And that's massgeneral.org/Blum-Center. I would say I would give it about a week and it'll get posted.
Thank you so much for having us, Amy, and thank you everybody for being vulnerable and being willing to share and enter into this space with us. It was an
We really
honor to
appreciate
be
it.
here with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.